think about how many times you use your ID during the day, at the bank, at the store, sometimes when you use your credit card.
Yeah, but imagine if you've never had identification and been turned away each time you've tried. It's a problem that many homeless teens, ex-convicts, and others have in Washington. Tonight, in a KXLY4 Focus, our John Langeler is live to show us the struggles of the unidentified.
Robin, it is Friday night, so a lot of people are coming to local banks, paychecks in hand, to take care of their amount that they've earned during the week. But if they don't have identification, it's going to be very hard to do. And those that don't have ID often bring their paychecks to payday loan businesses instead. So this is one example of how hard it can be to live without ID. And it's one reason that some say Washington's laws are too strict.
Your name is John Rose.
Yeah.
But there's no way to prove that.
No way to prove it at all.
This is John Rose. He's sure of it. So are his friends and family.
You know who you are.
Oh, I know who I am. Of course I know who I am.
All your friends know who you are.
Everybody knows who I am.
It's just the state that doesn't
think they wouldn't even try and acknowledge that I am who I am.
This is his only form of picture ID, a school ID from Crosswalk School. He was in the foster system, was a teenage runaway, and has a juvenile record.
I'm above the age of 21. I'm not allowed to go to bars. Well, it's not a big deal for me, but I mean, it doesn't allow me to vote. No bank accounts at all. No way for me to even cash my checks at a bank. Can't drive. Can't do that at all. I have trouble even getting to R-rated movies. That's bad.
One decision the day he was born has burdened him for every day since. He was born before his parents married, and only his mother's name is on his birth certificate. And she hasn't been part of his life for years.
I've always went by my father's last name ever since I was a little kid. So that not being on my birth certificate, it makes it very, very hard for me to be able to do anything.
So for the last 8 years, Rose has tried to identify himself. School records, his juvenile record, tax papers, a paternity suit, his social security card. Nothing works.
The last time I went to the DMV, I did have a copy of my birth certificate at that time, and I went in there with that. I went in there with a few bills that I had that were sent to me at an address, and I went in there. At the time I did have a social security card, but they told me, well, we can't help you. You don't have what we need. They handed me my little booklet and they said, you have to go.
Rose says he never got a specific idea of what he needed, only that he needed to present more information. He's far from the only person struggling to find his identity.
They wouldn't do anything.
18-year-old Cheyenne Emery was also a homeless teenager. She ran away from home and lived at Crosswalk. An advocate tried to help her.
It was frustrating because we had this much information still and they wouldn't give me anything. I had like 40 proofs of addresses where I lived. I mean, come on.
Emery ended up moving to Coeur d'Alene with a friend. Idaho's laws are not as strict as Washington's. In Idaho, it took Cheyenne just 1 day to get ID.
All I needed was my birth certificate, my school ID, and a yearbook, and proof of address. It's that social security card. It's that easy. Not a whole stack of papers.
So what does it take to get an ID in Washington? In May, the state changed its proof of identity rules. To prove who you are, you need a driver's license, a military or government ID, a passport, immigration ID, or parental consent. Or you can have two of the following supporting documents: a foreign passport, Indian ID, verification letter from state or federal corrections or DSHS. Or you can have city or police ID. Or you can have a supporting document and two alternate documents. They include adoption papers, a concealed weapons permit, a King County Club entertainer card, refugee relief placement packet, and dozens of other papers. The bottom line, the state needs more.
What we were finding was that people were coming in from other states to get a license in Washington, and they weren't residents here. They were simply coming to Washington, getting a license, and then returning to their home state.
The Department of Licensing says it does try to accommodate people who don't have enough ID, but the goal is increased security from fraud and criminal activity. It says it can't allow shortcuts.
We don't want to make it, impossible for anybody to get identification. I think that as a society we would agree that we can't just give driver's licenses to, anybody who asks for one.
Social advocates say these new rules make it harder for the homeless and less fortunate to get identification. And without that, it's hard for them to get their lives back on track. Meanwhile, Rose will continue to try and prove to the state who he really is.
I'm just very dejected about the situation. It irritates me. When you're not able to prove who you are, so I mean, it does stop you from being able to go out and do things.
He plans on spending $400 to get a blood test, which would prove who his father is. He also has a child on the way, and he doesn't want the same thing holding his baby back that is holding him back.
You can go through organizations and such, but it's kind of hard because they don't always have what you need to do. You know, nobody's ever got the right answers for you when you're actually looking for it.
So again, Rose has never driven, he's never voted, he's never had a bank account. He did manage to get a job, but he is one of those that has to take his checks to the payday loan businesses, and they take so much out of interest. He really struggles with that. A lot of the interest takes his money away, and that makes it very difficult for him to live. Reporting live, John Langeler, KXLY4.